The HR office fell so silent you could hear the air conditioning humming through the vents. Victoria Winters closed the folder in front of her, looked directly at Marcus Jenkins, and spoke without a trace of emotion. "Peek one more time and you're fired." Marcus stood still. He did not apologize. He did not argue. He simply raised his head and answered with a single sentence, his voice steady, calm to the point of being unsettling. Diane Collins, the head of human resources, stopped writing. Victoria froze mid-sentence. No one in that room expected that a single reply could shift everything. Marcus Jenkins was 38 years old, a pediatric ICU nurse at Memorial Hospital in Chicago. He had worked there for 11 years, building a reputation as one of the most reliable and compassionate nurses on the floor. His patient satisfaction scores consistently ranked among the highest in the department. His colleagues trusted him with the most difficult cases. The families of the children he cared for remembered him by name long after their children had recovered and gone home. He had a gift for remaining calm in chaos, for speaking to terrified parents in a way that made them feel heard without diminishing the seriousness of their child's condition. His personnel file was spotless, his annual evaluations consistently excellent, his attendance record impeccable. But none of that seemed to matter anymore. 3 years earlier, his wife Rachel had died of ovarian cancer. She had been diagnosed late during what should have been a routine checkup, and by the time they understood the severity of her condition, the disease had already spread beyond the reach of treatment. She fought for 14 months with a ferocity that matched her love for her family, but in the end, the cancer was stronger. She died on a Tuesday morning in April, with Marcus holding her hand and their daughter Lily asleep in the next room. Lily was only 4 at the time. Now she was 7, a bright-eyed girl with her mother's smile and a stubborn streak that reminded Marcus of himself in ways that both delighted and terrified him. He had no family nearby. His parents lived in Florida, too elderly to provide regular help. Rachel's parents had passed away before Lily was born. There was no safety net, no backup plan, no margin for error. Just a job that provided health insurance and a daughter who needed him to hold everything together. Victoria Winters had arrived at Memorial Hospital 8 months earlier, appointed as the new director of nursing after a decorated career at a prestigious teaching hospital in Boston. She was 41, precise, disciplined, and utterly convinced that professionalism meant leaving personal life at the door. Her philosophy was simple and uncompromising. Work and home were separate worlds, and any blurring of that line was a liability that endangered patients and undermined institutional efficiency. She had climbed her way through hospital administration by being ruthless about standards, unforgiving about infractions, and singularly focused on measurable outcomes. She saw no reason to change that approach now. From her first week at Memorial, she had noticed Marcus, not because of his excellent record, but because of the phone he occasionally glanced at during meetings. She did not ask why he looked. She did not inquire about his circumstances or wonder what might be happening in his life that required such vigilance. She only saw a nurse who seemed distracted, and she began to watch. In her mind, distraction was the first step toward disaster. A nurse who could not focus completely was a nurse who would eventually make a mistake, and mistakes in a pediatric ICU could be fatal. For Marcus, losing his job was not just about income or career setback. It meant losing Lily's health insurance, the coverage that paid for her pediatrician visits, her vaccinations, the occasional trip to urgent care when a cold turned into an ear infection. It meant losing the stability he had fought so hard to maintain since Rachel's death. Every shift he worked carried that weight. Every decision he made was filtered through the knowledge that he had no room for error, no second chances, no one waiting in the wings to catch him if he fell. The trouble started small, the way most trouble does. A text message from Lily's school about a permission slip for an upcoming field trip. A quick call from the babysitter confirming pickup time because traffic was heavier than expected. A glance at the phone during a staff meeting to make sure nothing was wrong at home. to make sure his daughter was safe and accounted for. Marcus never checked his phone while attending to a patient. He was meticulous about that boundary. But the moments in between, the brief pauses during paperwork, or the lull before a meeting began, those were the moments he allowed himself to stay connected to the other half of his life. And those were the moments Victoria noticed. She began documenting everything with the precision of a prosecutor building a case. She did not speak to Marcus directly about her concerns. She did not offer a verbal warning or suggest a meeting to discuss the issue. She did not ask if there was something happening in his personal life that might explain the behavior. She simply recorded each instance in a file, building her evidence brick by brick. The first documented incident was a Tuesday afternoon in September. Marcus had finished charting for a young patient recovering from cardiac surgery. The child was stable, the monitors steady, and Marcus stepped into the hallway to check a message from Lily's teacher about a change in the after-school schedule. Victoria walked past and saw the phone in his hand. She noted the date, the time, and the approximate location. She wrote it down and added it to his file. The second incident came a week later during a nursing team meeting. The meeting had not yet officially begun. Nurses were still settling into their seats, chatting about weekend plans and shift schedules. Marcus felt his phone vibrate in his pocket and glanced at the screen for less than 2 seconds. It was the babysitter confirming that Lily had arrived home safely from school. He slipped the phone back into his pocket without responding, but Victoria was sitting across the table and caught the movement of his eyes. She added it to the file without comment. Over the following weeks, the list grew. A glance here, a quick check there. Never during patient care. Never during critical moments. Always in the spaces between, the transitions, the pauses. But to Victoria, these distinctions did not matter. Policy was policy, and the policy stated that personal phones were not to be used during work hours. She accumulated 17 documented incidents before deciding to act. 3 weeks after the first notation, during a department-wide meeting in the main conference room, Victoria addressed the staff about hospital policies. She spoke about professionalism, about focus, about the importance of being fully present during work hours. Her voice was measured and authoritative, carrying the weight of institutional backing, and then she looked directly at Marcus. The look lasted only a moment, but everyone in the room noticed it. "Personal phones are not to be used during hospital operations," she said. "This is not a suggestion. It is a requirement. 3 strikes and you are terminated." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle over the assembled nurses. "Peek one more time and you're fired." The room went quiet. Other nurses exchanged uncomfortable glances. Everyone understood who the message was meant for. Marcus felt the eyes of his colleagues on him, some sympathetic, others curious. A few simply relieved that they were not the ones in the crosshairs. He said nothing. There was nothing to say. He understood perfectly. This was not a policy reminder. This was a public declaration that he was being watched, that he had been judged and found wanting, and that the slightest misstep would end his career. He left the meeting feeling like a man walking across thin ice, knowing that somewhere beneath his feet the cold water was waiting. The morning of the HR meeting, Marcus woke at 5:45 to the sound of Lily calling from her bedroom. Her voice was small and uncertain, the way it always was when she woke from a bad dream. He found her sitting up in bed, her stuffed rabbit clutched to her chest, asking if today was a school day. He told her yes, kissed her forehead, and went downstairs to start breakfast. The routine was the same as always. Eggs, toast, orange juice. Lily liked her eggs scrambled soft, the way Rachel used to make them. Marcus had learned to replicate it exactly, adjusting the heat, stirring constantly, pulling the pan off the burner at precisely the right moment. It was a small thing, but it mattered. It was one of the ways he kept Rachel's memory alive in their daily life. At 7:15, as Marcus was packing Lily's lunch, she knocked her glass of orange juice across the kitchen table. The juice spread in a bright orange wave, soaking into the front of her school dress before either of them could react. Lily burst into tears immediately, not because of the mess, but because it was her favorite dress, the one with the small embroidered flowers along the hem that Rachel had bought for her during a shopping trip just weeks before her diagnosis. Marcus knelt beside his daughter and wiped her cheeks with a dish towel, telling her it was okay, that they would wash the dress and it would be fine, that the flowers would still be there when it was clean. He helped her change into another outfit while the minutes ticked away and his anxiety mounted. By the time they left the house, they were already running late. Traffic on the interstate was heavier than usual because of an accident near the downtown exit, and Marcus found himself gripping the steering wheel as the minutes slipped away. He arrived at Lily's school 10 minutes after the bell, walking her quickly through the front entrance and signing her in at the office, while the secretary gave him a look that was equal parts sympathy and disapproval. He hugged Lily goodbye in the hallway, holding her a little tighter than usual, and she looked up at him with her mother's eyes. "Are you okay, Daddy?" she asked. He told her he was fine, that he just had a busy day ahead. She nodded solemnly, accepting his explanation the way children do when they know something is wrong, but trust their parents to handle it. She turned back at the door of her classroom and blew him a kiss through the air. "I love you, Daddy," she said. He caught the kiss in his hand and pressed it to his heart. "I love you too, sweetheart." He did not notice until he was halfway to the hospital that there was peanut butter on his shirt from when Lily had hugged him. His tie was crooked. His hair was uncombed. He had forgotten to grab the breakfast he had packed for himself, which meant he would be running on coffee and vending machine snacks until lunch. He looked like a man who had already fought a battle before the day had even begun, and now he was walking into another one. The HR conference room was on the third floor of the administrative wing, a sterile space with beige walls and fluorescent lighting that made everyone look slightly unwell. Marcus arrived at 9 o'clock sharp, still carrying the invisible weight of the morning. Diane Collins was already seated at the head of the rectangular table, a thick folder open in front of her. Victoria Winters sat to her right, her posture rigid, her hands folded precisely on the table, her expression unreadable. There was a third chair on the opposite side, empty, waiting for him. He sat down without being asked and folded his own hands in his lap, mirroring Victoria's posture unconsciously. Diane opened the folder and began reading from the documentation. Her voice was neutral, professional, stripped of any emotional inflection. 17 instances of personal phone usage during work hours. 17 times Victoria had observed him checking his device when he should have been focused on hospital duties. The list was detailed and damning, with dates, times, and brief descriptions of each incident. September 3rd at 2:47 p.m., checking phone in hallway outside room 412. September 10th at 9:03 a.m., glancing at phone during pre-meeting period in conference room B. The recitation continued, each entry, another brick in the wall being built around him. Victoria spoke next, picking up where the documentation left off. Her voice was calm and professional, but there was a coldness beneath it that made the temperature in the room seem to drop. She argued that Marcus had demonstrated a pattern of distraction, that his personal life was clearly interfering with his professional responsibilities, that the hospital could not afford to employ nurses who were not fully committed to their duties. She spoke about patient safety, about institutional standards, about the importance of maintaining a culture of professionalism. "Policy is policy," she concluded. "There are no exceptions. Every employee is held to the same standard, regardless of personal circumstances." Marcus listened without interrupting. He watched Victoria's face as she spoke, searching for some sign of humanity beneath the administrative facade, but found nothing. When she finished, Diane turned to him and asked if he had anything to say in his defense. He took a breath and began to speak, keeping his voice level and calm. He did not raise his voice or plead for mercy. He simply stated the facts as he understood them. He explained that he had never once checked his phone while actively caring for a patient. He explained that every glance at his device had occurred during transitional moments, between tasks, after completing charts, or before meetings officially began. He explained that he was a single father, that his daughter was 7 years old, that her mother had died of cancer 3 years ago, and that being reachable in case of emergency was not a luxury but a necessity. Victoria interrupted before he could continue. "Policy does not account for personal circumstances," she said firmly. "Every employee must be held to the same standard. If we begin making exceptions for individual situations, the entire framework of professional expectations collapses. Your personal life, however sympathetic, is not the hospital's responsibility." The room felt smaller after those words. The air felt thicker, harder to breathe. Marcus could see the trajectory of this conversation, and he knew where it was heading. He was about to be fired, not for incompetence, not for harming a patient, but for caring too much about his daughter. The injustice of it burned in his chest, but he forced himself to remain calm. Anger would not help him here. Only truth had a chance. Marcus took a slow breath, feeling the weight of the moment pressing down on him. He looked at Diane, then at Victoria, and then he began to speak. His voice was quiet but clear, steady in a way that commanded attention without demanding it. "I understand the policy," he said, "and I understand why it exists. Hospitals need structure. They need rules that apply equally to everyone. I do not dispute that." He paused, choosing his next words carefully. "But I need you to understand something too. I am not choosing between being a nurse and being a father. I am both. Every single day, I am both. And those two things do not contradict each other. They come from the same place." He leaned forward slightly, his hands still folded on the table. "I have been a nurse at this hospital for 11 years. In that time, I have cared for hundreds of children. I have held the hands of parents receiving the worst news of their lives. I have celebrated recoveries and mourned losses. My patient satisfaction scores are in the top 5% of the department. I have never received a formal complaint from a family. I have never made an error in medication administration. I have never neglected a child under my care." He met Victoria's eyes directly. "What I have done is glance at my phone to make sure my 7-year-old daughter is safe. Not during patient care. Not during emergencies. During the quiet moments in between, when my work was complete and my attention was not required." Victoria opened her mouth to respond, but Marcus raised his hand slightly, a gesture requesting permission to continue. She hesitated, then closed her mouth again. He went on. "My wife died 3 years ago," he said, and his voice dropped slightly at the words, carrying a weight that filled the room. "Ovarian cancer. She was diagnosed late, and she died 14 months later. Lily was 4 years old. She does not remember her mother very well anymore. She remembers feelings, mostly. She remembers being happy. She remembers being loved." He swallowed. "Lily is all I have, and I am all she has. We do not have grandparents nearby. We do not have aunts or uncles who can step in. When her school calls, I need to know. When her babysitter has a question, I need to answer. When something goes wrong in her world, I am the only person she can count on." He sat back slightly, his posture relaxed but his eyes still focused. "That does not make me less committed to my patients. It makes me more committed, because I understand what those families are going through. I understand the terror of watching someone you love suffer. I understand the desperate need to be present, to be reachable, to know that you have done everything possible." He looked at Diane. "The best nurses I know are the ones who carry their humanity with them into every patient room. The ones who see children not as cases, but as someone's daughter, someone's son. I am that kind of nurse because I am a father. The two cannot be separated." He turned back to Victoria, and his voice softened slightly. "You talk about professionalism as if it means erasing everything outside these walls. But the families I care for do not want a machine. They want someone who understands what it means to love a child so much that you would do anything to keep them safe. They want someone who gets it. If making sure my daughter is okay makes me a liability in your eyes, then maybe I do not belong here. But I do not believe that is what this hospital stands for. I do not believe that is what anyone in this room truly believes." The silence that followed was complete. Diane set down her pen. Victoria stared at the table. No one moved. Diane Collins studied Marcus for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she turned to the folder in front of her and began flipping through pages that were not part of Victoria's documentation. These were performance reviews from the past 5 years, patient feedback forms, peer evaluations, and commendations. She read quietly, her finger tracing down columns of data, while Victoria sat rigid in her chair and Marcus waited with what patience he could muster. After several minutes, Diane looked up. "Mr. Jenkins," she said, "your patient satisfaction scores are consistently among the highest in the pediatric ICU. In the past 12 months alone, you have received formal commendations from 3 separate families. Your colleagues describe you as reliable, compassionate, thorough, and calm under pressure. Your annual evaluations for the past 5 years have all been rated as exceeds expectations or exceptional." She closed the folder. "There is no evidence in this file, or in any hospital record, that your performance has ever been compromised by personal distractions." She turned to Victoria, and her tone shifted slightly, becoming more pointed. "Miss Winters, you have documented 17 instances of personal phone usage. I have reviewed each one. They all occurred during non-critical periods, transitional moments, times when Mr. Jenkins was not actively engaged in patient care. Not one of these instances involved a patient interaction." She paused. "I need to ask you a direct question, and I need you to answer it honestly. Has patient care ever been compromised as a result of Mr. Jenkins checking his phone?" Victoria hesitated. For the first time since the meeting began, her composure showed signs of strain. Her jaw tightened, her hands pressed harder against the table. She opened her mouth, closed it, and then spoke carefully, measuring each word. "The policy exists to prevent potential issues before they occur. Prevention is the foundation of patient safety." Diane's expression did not change. "That is not what I asked," she said evenly. "Has patient care ever been compromised?" Victoria looked at the table. The silence stretched for several seconds. "No," she finally admitted, her voice quieter than before. "Not that I am aware of." Diane nodded slowly, as if Victoria had confirmed something she already knew. "Then it seems we are discussing a policy violation without any measurable harm to patients, operations, or colleagues." She turned back to Marcus. "Mr. Jenkins, I am not dismissing the concerns raised here. Hospital policies exist for good reasons, and I expect all employees to respect them. However, I am also not prepared to terminate an exemplary employee with an impeccable 11-year record over behavior that has caused no demonstrable damage to anyone." She made a note in her file, her pen moving with purpose. "I am recommending that we revisit our emergency communication protocols. Single parents and primary caregivers should have a clear, approved method for receiving urgent messages without violating workplace expectations. This is not about creating loopholes. It is about recognizing reality." She looked at Victoria. "We employ human beings, Miss Winters. Human beings have lives outside these walls. Our policies should acknowledge that fact without compromising patient care." Victoria stiffened visibly. "That would require a significant policy revision," she said, her voice tight. "It sets a precedent that personal circumstances can override professional standards." "Where does it end?" Diane met her gaze evenly, unflinching. "It sets a precedent that we recognize the humanity of our staff. That is not a weakness, Miss Winters. It is how you retain good people. It is how you build a culture where employees feel supported rather than surveilled." She closed her folder and stood. "This meeting is concluded. Mr. Jenkins, you are not being terminated. However, I expect you to work with your supervisor to establish appropriate boundaries going forward, and I expect both of you to find a way to work together professionally." Marcus nodded, relief flooding through him. "Thank you," he said quietly. Victoria said nothing. Her face was a mask. The hallway outside the HR office was empty except for the distant sound of footsteps on linoleum and the soft beeping of monitors from the nearby nursing station. Marcus walked toward the elevators, his mind still processing what had just happened. He had not been fired. His job was safe. Lily's insurance was secure. But he could feel Victoria behind him before he heard her voice. "Mr. Jenkins." Her tone was sharp, controlled, carrying the same authority she had wielded in the conference room. He turned. She stood 10 feet away, her arms crossed, her expression cold and uncompromising. "Do not mistake this outcome for vindication," she said. "Diane may have given you a reprieve, but I will be watching. One more incident, one more lapse in judgment, one more moment where your attention is not fully on this hospital, and I will personally ensure that your employment here ends. Do you understand me?" Marcus studied her for a moment. He could see the tension in her jaw, the rigidity in her posture, the way she held herself like armor against an invisible assault. She was not a villain. She was a woman who had built walls so high that she could no longer see over them. But he did not have time to feel sorry for her. He had a daughter to raise, a job to protect, and a life to live. Before he could respond, Victoria's phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out instinctively, a reflex so quick and automatic that she did not seem to realize what she was doing, and glanced at the screen. Her entire demeanor shifted in an instant. The color drained from her face. Her hand trembled slightly as she read the message. The ice in her expression cracked, revealing something raw and vulnerable beneath. "What is it?" Marcus asked, the words leaving his mouth before he could stop them. Victoria looked up, and for the first time, he saw something other than authority in her eyes. He saw fear. Real, unguarded fear. "It is my mother," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. She fell at the nursing home. They are transferring her to the emergency room. She stared at her phone as if willing it to say something different. "I have to go." "I have to." Marcus did not hesitate. "Go," he said, "right now. Do not wait. I will cover the unit meeting this afternoon. I will handle whatever needs to be handled. Just go be with her." Victoria stared at him, caught completely off guard by the offer. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. "The policy?" she began, her voice uncertain. Marcus cut her off, gently but firmly. "Family comes first," he said. "That is what you taught me today, whether you meant to or not. Go be with your mother. Everything else can wait." For a long moment, Victoria did not move. She stood frozen in the hallway, her phone still clutched in her hand, her face a battlefield of conflicting emotions. Then something in her expression cracked, just slightly, like the first fracture in ice that has been frozen too long. She nodded once, turned without another word, and walked quickly toward the elevators. Marcus watched her disappear around the corner, her heels clicking rapidly on the floor. He did not feel triumphant. He felt tired, and sad, and strangely hopeful. He felt a strange, unexpected compassion for a woman who had tried to destroy him just minutes ago, because he recognized something in her now that he had not seen before. He recognized the loneliness of carrying too much alone. 3 weeks passed. The rhythms of the hospital continued as they always did, an endless cycle of emergencies and recoveries, of grief and hope, of lives saved and lives lost. Marcus returned to his shifts in the pediatric ICU, caring for children who needed him, going home each night to a daughter who needed him more. He did not see much of Victoria during that time. She had taken several days off after her mother's fall, and when she returned, she seemed different, quieter, less certain. The sharpness that had defined her presence was dulled, replaced by something that looked almost like exhaustion. One afternoon, Marcus was sitting in the break room, eating a turkey sandwich and reviewing patient notes on his tablet, when Victoria appeared in the doorway. She hesitated there for a moment, framed by the fluorescent light of the hallway, looking uncertain in a way he had never seen before. Then she stepped inside and closed the door behind her. "Do you have a minute?" she asked. Her voice was softer than he had ever heard it. Marcus set down his sandwich and gestured to the chair across from him. She sat down slowly, her hands folded in her lap, her eyes fixed on the table between them. For a long moment, she said nothing, as if gathering the courage to speak. Then she began. "My mother has early-stage dementia," she said quietly. "I have been her primary caregiver for 2 years now, since my father passed away. I visit her every day after work. I manage her medications, her doctor's appointments, her finances, her living situation. I coordinate with the nursing home staff when there are problems. I do all of it alone because I have no siblings and no other family to share the burden." She looked up at him, and her eyes were red-rimmed, as if she had been crying recently. "I never told anyone at work. I thought it would make me seem weak, incapable of handling my responsibilities. I thought if I admitted that my personal life was complicated, I would lose credibility, respect, authority. So I built walls. I enforced rules without exceptions, because I could not afford to have exceptions in my own life." Marcus listened without interrupting. He could see the effort it took for her to say these words, the layers of pride and self-protection she was peeling back. "When you told me to go be with my mother that day," Victoria continued, "I did not know how to respond. No one has ever said that to me at work. No one has ever acknowledged that I might have something outside these walls that matters, that needs my attention, that cannot wait." She paused, her voice catching. "I owed you an apology before that moment, and I owe you an even greater one now. I judged you without understanding. I tried to punish you for doing exactly what I would have done in your position, what I have done countless times without anyone watching." Her voice cracked slightly. "I am sorry, Marcus, truly and deeply sorry." Marcus was quiet for a moment, letting her words settle. Then he leaned forward, his elbows resting on the table. "Caregiving is hard," he said simply. "For anyone. It does not matter if you are a single father or a daughter watching her mother disappear piece by piece. It takes everything you have, and sometimes it takes more than that. Sometimes it takes things you did not know you could give." He met her eyes. "I do not need you to be perfect, Victoria. I just needed you to see me as a person, and now you do, and I see you the same way." Victoria nodded, blinking back tears she refused to let fall. "Thank you," she whispered, "for not holding it against me, for offering help when I had given you every reason not to." Marcus shook his head gently. "We are all just trying to survive," he said. "Some days we do it better than others. The best we can do is help each other when we can." Over the following months, something remarkable happened at Memorial Hospital. Victoria Winters, the director known for her inflexibility and her ironclad enforcement of rules, became an advocate for change. She worked closely with Diane Collins and the hospital administration to develop a new set of protocols for employees with caregiving responsibilities. The policy was simple but revolutionary in its acknowledgement of reality. Staff members who were primary caregivers, whether for children, aging parents, spouses with chronic illness, or family members with disabilities, could register for an emergency notification system. They would be allowed to keep their phones accessible during non-critical moments, provided they followed clear guidelines about when and how to check messages. The system included designated break times, approved notification methods, and a clear process for handling genuine emergencies. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Nurses who had been silently struggling to balance impossible demands felt seen for the first time. Parents who had been terrified of missing an emergency call from school felt supported rather than surveilled. Adult children caring for aging parents no longer had to choose between their careers and their families. Retention rates improved across the department. Morale lifted in ways that showed up in patient satisfaction scores and peer evaluations. The pediatric ICU, already one of the highest performing units in the hospital, saw its metrics climb even higher. Victoria did not stop there. She began holding monthly meetings with staff to discuss work-life challenges openly and honestly. She shared her own story, not as an excuse for her past behavior, but as an example of what happens when people feel they cannot be honest about their struggles. She admitted that she had been wrong, that she had confused rigidity with strength, that she had punished others for the very same needs she had been hiding in herself. And in doing so, she earned something she had never consciously sought before: the genuine respect of the people she led. Marcus watched these changes unfold with quiet satisfaction. He did not seek credit or recognition for the role he had played. He simply continued doing his job, caring for sick children with the same dedication and compassion he had always shown. But he noticed the difference in the way people spoke to each other, the way supervisors asked about home lives without judgment, the way the hospital began to feel less like a machine and more like a community. In November, Marcus was nominated for the hospital's annual Excellence in Nursing Award. He did not campaign for it or expect to win. But when his name was called at the ceremony, he walked to the stage and accepted the plaque with a brief, humble speech. He thanked his colleagues, the families he had served, and the hospital for giving him the chance to do work that mattered. He did not mention Victoria by name, but when he looked out at the audience, he saw her sitting in the third row, applauding with everyone else. Their eyes met for just a moment, and she nodded. A small gesture of acknowledgement that carried more weight than any words could have expressed. The hospital's annual Family Day arrived on a crisp Saturday in early December. The parking lot had been transformed into a small carnival, with game booths, food trucks, and a stage where hospital administrators gave brief speeches about community and gratitude. Colorful banners fluttered in the cold breeze. Children ran between booths, their laughter echoing across the grounds. The smell of hot chocolate and cinnamon donuts drifted through the air. Marcus arrived, holding Lily's hand. She was wearing a t-shirt she had picked out herself, white with bold blue letters that read, "My Dad Saves Lives." She had seen it in a store window 2 weeks earlier and insisted on buying it with her own allowance, money she had saved from birthday cards and tooth fairy visits. Marcus had tried to talk her out of it, embarrassed by the attention it might draw, but Lily was her mother's daughter. Once she made up her mind about something, there was no changing it. They walked through the crowd together, stopping to play ring toss and eat cotton candy. Lily won a small stuffed bear at a beanbag game and immediately named it Dr. Cuddles. Marcus watched her skip ahead toward the next booth, her ponytail bouncing, her laughter ringing clear, and felt a wave of gratitude so powerful it nearly brought him to his knees. This was why he fought so hard. This was why he endured every difficult shift, every sleepless night, every moment of doubt and exhaustion. Not for awards or recognition, but for the simple joy of watching his daughter be happy. Near the main stage, they ran into Diane Collins, who was there with her own grandchildren. She bent down to compliment Lily's shirt. "Your dad does save lives," Diane said warmly, "and he is pretty good at it." Lily beamed with pride. "I know," she said matter-of-factly. Later, as the afternoon sun began to fade toward the horizon, casting long golden shadows across the carnival grounds, Lily tugged on Marcus's sleeve. They were sitting on a bench near the food trucks, sharing a funnel cake, and Lily had powdered sugar on her nose. "Daddy," she said, her voice curious, "are you still going to get fired if you check your phone?" Marcus laughed, a real laugh that came from somewhere deep inside him. "No, sweetheart," he said. "Actually, now I am supposed to check it sometimes. The hospital changed the rules." Lily considered this seriously, the way 7-year-olds do when they are trying to understand the complicated world of adults. "So the lady who was mean to you is not mean anymore?" Marcus looked across the field and saw Victoria standing near the stage, talking with a group of nurses. She was smiling, something he rarely saw, and the tension that had always defined her posture seemed to have eased. She looked different now, lighter, less guarded, more human. She was never really mean, Marcus said thoughtfully. She was just scared, and sometimes people act tough because they are hurting inside. They build walls so nobody can see how much pain they are carrying. Lily nodded solemnly, as if this explanation made perfect sense to her. Like when Tommy pushed me on the playground because his dog died. Exactly like that, Marcus said, impressed as always by his daughter's emotional intelligence. From across the field, Victoria noticed them watching. She hesitated for a moment, then raised her hand in a small wave. Lily waved back enthusiastically, her whole arm moving with the gesture. Marcus simply nodded, and Victoria returned the gesture before turning back to her conversation. As the sun set behind the hospital building, casting the sky in shades of orange and purple, Marcus lifted Lily onto his shoulders. She wrapped her small arms around his head and rested her chin on top of it, Dr. Cuddles tucked securely under one arm. "Daddy," she said quietly, "I am glad you did not get fired." "Me too, sweetheart," he replied. "Me too." They walked toward the parking lot together, Lily humming a song she had learned at school, her voice sweet and slightly off-key. Behind them, the lights of the carnival flickered on against the darkening sky, and the sound of laughter drifted through the cold December air. Sometimes, Marcus thought, the biggest changes begin with the smallest moments. A glance at a phone, a single sentence spoken with calm certainty, a willingness to see another person not as an obstacle, but as a human being carrying their own invisible burdens. He had not set out to change anything. He had simply told the truth when it mattered most, and somehow, impossibly, that had been enough. A calm truth, spoken at the right moment, can change an entire system. But more than that, it can remind us that behind every policy, every rule, every institutional wall, there are people, people who love, people who grieve, people who are just trying to make it through another day without losing what matters most. Marcus Jenkins was not a hero. He was a father who refused to apologize for loving his daughter. He was a nurse who understood that caring for patients and caring for family came from the same wellspring of compassion. And in the end, that refusal to separate the two, that quiet insistence on being fully human, opened a door that had been closed for far too long. The hospital would continue to change, policies would evolve, new challenges would arise. But something fundamental had shifted in the culture of Memorial Hospital, a recognition that strength and vulnerability could coexist. That excellence and humanity were not opposing forces, that the best workplaces were the ones that saw their employees as whole people with lives that mattered beyond the clock-in and clock-out times. And somewhere in Chicago, in a small house that still held photographs of a woman who had died too young, a 7-year-old girl fell asleep that night, clutching a stuffed bear named Dr. Cuddles. She was wearing a shirt that said her dad saved lives. She was right. He did. Every single day.